Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories. Today I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story asterisk. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Ashford mansion, casting geometric shadows across the pristine marble floors. Emma Sterling moved quietly through the hallway, her bare feet making no sound as she passed mirror after mirror. Each reflection showed her the same thing, a perfectly dressed woman with hollow eyes. Someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible in her own home. She paused at the bedroom doorway, watching Richard adjust his tie with practiced precision. Her husband barely glanced her way as she entered, his attention already consumed by the phone pressed to his ear. Emma had grown accustomed to this version of their mornings, where words were replaced by silence and connection had become a distant memory. "Good morning," she ventured softly. Smoothing down the front of her silk dress, Richard nodded absently, his conversation about quarterly reports and market projections filling the space where their dialogue used to live. Emma turned away, fighting the familiar tightness in her chest. She remembered when his eyes would light up at the sight of her, when her presence meant something beyond being a convenient accessory to his carefully curated life. The breakfast table was set with meticulous care, as always. Fresh fruit arranged in perfect pyramids, toast cut into precise triangles, coffee steaming in delicate porcelain cups. Emma sat in her designated chair, the one that gave her a view of the garden but kept her facing away from the room's entrance. She wondered when she had stopped questioning these small arrangements, when she had accepted being positioned just outside the center of everything. "The gala tonight," Richard said suddenly, startling her from her thoughts. He had finally set down his phone, though his fingers still hovered near it, ready to snatch it up at the first buzz. "I need you to wear the navy dress. The one with the high collar." Emma nodded automatically, then hesitated. "I was thinking about the emerald one. The one we bought in Paris, remember? You said it made my eyes stand out." His expression flickered with something like impatience. "The navy one is more appropriate. This event is important, Emma. I need everything to be perfect." The unspoken words hung between them. You need to be perfect, but invisible. Present, but not noticeable. There, but not really seen. She swallowed her disappointment along with her orange juice, the sweet liquid suddenly tasting bitter. "Of course, whatever you think is best." Richard returned to his phone, and Emma returned to her silence. The morning passed in this familiar dance of proximity without intimacy, presence without connection. By the time his driver arrived, she felt like she had already faded into the wallpaper. The hours before the gala stretched endlessly. Emma moved through them with automatic precision, each action rehearsed from countless similar events. She applied her makeup with a light hand, styled her hair in a simple twist, fastened the clasp of the navy dress that made her feel like she was wearing a uniform rather than an outfit. When she looked in the mirror, she saw exactly what Richard wanted, someone elegant, enough to belong but understated enough to disappear. The grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the murmur of important conversations. Emma recognized the familiar faces of business associates, investors, and society figures who populated Richard's world. She smiled politely, shook hands gently, and spoke only when spoken to. Over the years, she had perfected the art of being present without leaving an impression. Richard moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who knew he belonged everywhere. Emma followed a half step behind, close enough to appear connected, but far enough to avoid interfering with his networking. She watched him laugh at jokes, clasp shoulders, make promises with his eyes. This was his element, and she was merely a shadow in it. "Mr. Ashford, a photo for the business section." A photographer appeared with a camera and an eager smile. "We want to capture the man behind Ashford Industries' latest expansion." Emma instinctively moved to stand beside her husband, arranging her face into a pleasant expression. But before the camera could flash, Richard's hand found her elbow. His fingers pressing just hard enough to send a message, he leaned close. His breath warm against her ear, his voice a whisper that felt like a knife. "Not in the photo, Emma. You don't really fit the image we're projecting tonight." The words were delivered with such casual cruelty that for a moment, Emma thought she had misheard. But then he was gently but firmly guiding her aside, replacing her with Vanessa Reed, his sleek business partner, whose sharp suit and sharper smile perfectly embodied the corporate aesthetic he desired. Emma stood frozen as the camera flashed, capturing Richard and Vanessa in a moment of professional triumph while she remained just outside the frame, just beyond the light. The photographer thanked them and moved on. Oblivious to the earthquake that had just shattered something inside her chest. She remained at the edge of the crowd for the rest of the evening, a ghost at her own life's party. People brushed past her without acknowledgement. Conversations flowed around her without inclusion. Richard continued his networking without a single glance in her direction, as if she had already ceased to exist. The drive home was silent except for the sound of Richard typing on his phone. Emma stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. Each one, a tiny universe of life and warmth that felt impossibly distant from her own cold reality. She thought about all the small moments that had led to this one. The gradual erosion of her presence in his eyes. The slow disappearance of her worth in his world. When they arrived home, Richard went directly to his study without a word. Emma climbed the stairs to their bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. She stood before the full-length mirror, still wearing the navy dress that had marked her as acceptable, but ignoble. The woman staring back at her looked tired, diminished, like a photograph that had been left too long in the sun. She unzipped the dress slowly, letting it fall to the floor in a pool of fabric that no longer mattered. Beneath it, she felt exposed, but also, strangely, more present than she had been all evening. In her undergarments, without the costume of acceptability, she could see herself more clearly than she had in months. Her phone buzzed with a message from Grace, her grandmother. "How was the gala, sweetheart?" Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to type the truth. To confess that she had finally understood what she had been refusing to see, that she had been disappearing for years. One small accommodation at a time, one silenced opinion after another, one outfit chosen for her instead of by her. Instead, she wrote, "It was fine." "Talk tomorrow?" She set the phone down and moved to the window. Looking out at the garden that she had planted herself, one of the few spaces where her choices still mattered. The moonlight illuminated the roses she had carefully tended, their blooms opening in the darkness, unafraid to take up space. Unashamed of their color and their presence, something shifted inside her in that moment. A small crack in the careful construction she had built around her diminished self. It was not yet freedom, but it was the beginning of awareness. The recognition that she had been complicit in her own erasure, that somewhere along the way, she had agreed to become small enough to fit into someone else's idea of perfect. The night stretched on, sleepless and heavy with realization. Emma lay in the vast bed, Richard's absence beside her, feeling more honest than his presence had in years. She thought about the woman she had been before this marriage. The one who laughed too loudly and wore colors that announced her arrival. The one who believed her thoughts mattered and her presence was a gift rather than an inconvenience. That woman felt like a stranger now. Someone she had lost touch with so gradually that she hadn't noticed the disconnection until the line went completely dead. But in the quiet darkness of that long night, Emma made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. She would not disappear any further. She could not yet imagine what coming back into focus would look like. Could not yet see the path forward clearly. But she knew, with a certainty that felt like the first true thing she had felt in years, that she could not continue fading. The alternative was to vanish completely, and somewhere deep inside, beneath all the layers of accommodation and diminishment, there was still a spark that refused to be extinguished. As dawn began to color the sky outside her window, Emma rose and dressed in clothes she chose for herself. Not the navy dress that made her invisible, but jeans and a soft sweater that felt like her own skin. She looked at herself in the mirror one more time, seeing not perfection, but possibility. The woman reflected back was still there, still breathing, still capable of making choices. And today, Emma Sterling chose to begin the long journey back to herself. Whatever that would cost her, whatever that would require her to leave behind. The morning after the gala, Emma woke to an empty house. Richard had left before dawn for a business trip to Singapore, his absence marked only by a brief text message that read more like a business memo than a farewell from a husband. She stared at the words on her phone screen, feeling nothing except a strange sense of relief for the first time in years. She had space to breathe without measuring each breath against someone else's expectations. Emma spent the day moving through the mansion like a visitor in a museum, examining the life she had built with Richard as if seeing it for the first time. The pristine white furniture that she had never chosen, the abstract art on the walls that left her cold, the kitchen filled with appliances too expensive to actually use. Everything was beautiful in the way that catalog pages are beautiful. Perfect, but utterly devoid of warmth or personality. She found herself standing in her closet, surrounded by racks of clothes that Richard had approved over the years. Muted colors, conservative cuts, nothing that would draw too much attention or project the wrong image. She pushed through them methodically until her fingers found something wedged in the back. A flowing floral dress she had bought years ago. Before the wedding, when she still dressed for herself, Emma pulled it out. The fabric soft and alive with color. She held it against her body and looked in the mirror, seeing a glimpse of the woman she used to be. The woman who wore what made her happy, who smiled without permission, who took up space without apologizing for it. That evening, she called Grace. Her grandmother answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar, like coming home. Ashi. I was hoping you'd call, Grandma Grace. Emma's voice cracked slightly. Can I come stay with you for a while? There was no hesitation, no questions asked. Of course, sweetheart. When? Tomorrow. Is that too soon? Tomorrow is perfect. I'll make up your old room. Emma packed a single suitcase that night, taking only the things that felt like hers. The floral dress, her journals, photographs from before the marriage, a few books Richard had never approved of. She left behind the navy dress, still crumpled on the floor where she had stepped out of it. A shed skin she no longer needed. She did not leave a note. After years of explaining herself, justifying her feelings, apologizing for taking up space, Emma found a profound freedom in simply going. She would call Richard eventually, would have the necessary conversations, but not yet. Not until she had remembered who she was without his voice in her head, editing her thoughts before she could speak them. Grace's apartment was everything the mansion was not. Small, cluttered with memories, filled with the smell of lavender and fresh coffee. Her grandmother embraced her at the door without asking what had happened, simply holding her until Emma's shoulders stopped shaking. Come in, my girl. You're home now. The first weeks were difficult. Emma woke each morning expecting to feel Richard's judgment, braced for criticism that never came. She moved carefully at first, as if still walking on eggshells, until Grace gently pointed out that she was allowed to open cabinets to choose her own food, to sit wherever she wanted without asking permission. You've been living like a guest in your own life, Grace observed one morning over breakfast. It's time to remember you belong everywhere you are. Slowly, Emma began to unfold. She took long walks without telling anyone where she was going. She wore the floral dress and other colorful clothes she bought from small shops. She let her hair down, literally and figuratively, allowing it to fall naturally, instead of constraining it in the tight styles Richard preferred. Each small act of autonomy felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Grace had a friend who owned a small event planning business, and when Emma mentioned her interest in design and organization, an introduction was arranged. The office was modest, nothing like the corporate spaces Richard inhabited, but it buzzed with creative energy and genuine warmth. So you want to help plan events? Thomas Chen, the owner, regarded her with kind eyes. He was middle-aged, slightly rumpled, with paint stains on his shirt cuffs that suggested he was more interested in creating beauty than projecting perfection. I want to help create experiences that make people feel welcome, Emma said carefully. I want to design spaces where everyone feels like they belong. Thomas smiled. When can you start? Working at Chen Events transformed something in Emma. For the first time in years, she was valued for her ideas rather than her ability to disappear. Thomas encouraged her creativity, asking for her opinions and actually implementing her suggestions. She discovered she had a natural talent for understanding what made spaces feel inviting, for choosing details that made people feel seen and celebrated. Her coworkers became friends. They invited her to lunch, asked about her life, shared their own stories without expecting her to perform or pretend. Emma found herself laughing again, the sound surprising her with its volume and authenticity. 3 months after leaving the mansion, Emma was reviewing plans for a corporate reception when Thomas mentioned that the client was Daniel Cross, owner of a boutique hotel chain called Harbor House. The name meant nothing to her. But when Daniel arrived for their meeting, something in the air shifted. He was tall, but not imposing, dressed well, but not obsessively, with gray threading through his dark hair and eyes that looked at people instead of through them. When he shook her hand, his grip was firm but warm, and he held eye contact in a way that felt respectful rather than challenging. "You must be Emma. Thomas speaks highly of your work."
Thank you.
"I've been looking forward to discussing your vision for the reception." The meeting flowed naturally. Daniel listened carefully to her ideas, asked thoughtful questions, offered suggestions that built on her concepts rather than replacing them. He treated her like a partner in the creative process. And Emma found herself contributing ideas she would have kept silent about in her previous life. "I love the concept of creating intimate conversation areas within the larger space," Daniel said, studying her sketches. "It shows you understand that business relationships are built on genuine connection, not just networking." Emma felt herself blush slightly at the praise. "I think people remember how you made them feel more than they remember the decorations." "Exactly." Daniel's smile was genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I think we're going to work well together." Over the following weeks, as they collaborated on the event, Emma discovered that Daniel was different from the businessmen in Richard's world. He had built his hotel chain around the philosophy of creating spaces where people felt at home, where luxury meant comfort rather than intimidation. He talked about his properties the way someone might talk about beloved family members. With genuine affection and pride, they worked late one evening, finalizing details. When Daniel noticed Emma studying a particular flower arrangement with intense concentration, "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. "I'm thinking about visibility," Emma said slowly. "About how some arrangements are designed to be noticed, to make a statement, while others are meant to be beautiful but not draw attention. I'm trying to find the balance." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "In my experience, the most beautiful things are the ones that aren't afraid to be seen. They don't shout, but they don't hide either. They just exist fully and authentically." Emma looked up at him, and something in his expression made her feel suddenly, unexpectedly seen. Not examined or judged, but simply acknowledged in a way that felt like recognition. "That's a lovely way to think about it," she said softly. The reception was a tremendous success. Emma moved through the event with confidence she had forgotten she possessed, adjusting details, greeting guests, solving small problems with ease. She wore a dress she had chosen herself, a soft blue that made her feel beautiful, without feeling like she was wearing a costume. Daniel found her near the end of the evening, standing on a balcony overlooking the city lights. "You did an incredible job," he said, joining her at the railing. "Everything was perfect, but more than that, it felt warm, real. That's rare in corporate events." "Thank you. That means a lot." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Daniel spoke again. "Emma, I hope this isn't too forward, but I'd like to continue working with you. Harbor House is planning several events this year, and I can't imagine anyone better to help bring them to life." Emma's heart lifted. "I would love that." And Daniel continued, a slight hesitation in his voice. "I'd also like to take you to dinner sometime. Not as a business meeting, but as two people who enjoy each other's company. If you're interested." Emma turned to look at him fully. His expression was open, hopeful, but not presumptuous, clearly prepared to accept whatever her answer might be. He was offering, not demanding. Inviting, not expecting. "I would like that very much," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Their first dinner was at a small restaurant with exposed brick walls and tables close enough that conversations created a gentle hum of human connection. Daniel asked her about her life, and for the first time, Emma found herself sharing honestly about her marriage, about the slow disappearance of herself, about the moment at the gala when she finally understood what had been happening. Daniel listened without trying to fix anything, without offering unwanted advice or empty reassurances. He simply heard her, witnessing her story with compassion and respect. "I'm sorry you went through that," he said finally. "No one should have to earn the right to exist fully in their own life." Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the simple acknowledgement. "I'm still learning how to do that. How to exist fully, I mean. I think you're doing beautifully." They began seeing each other regularly, building a relationship that felt fundamentally different from anything Emma had known. Daniel never tried to change her or mold her into some image he preferred. He seemed genuinely curious about her thoughts, her opinions, her preferences. When they disagreed, he engaged with her perspective rather than dismissing it. When she expressed uncertainty, he created space for her to find her own answers rather than imposing his. 6 months after leaving Richard, Emma received divorce papers via courier. She signed them without hesitation, feeling nothing except relief. That chapter of her life was closing, and she was ready to let it end. But the universe, it seemed, was not quite finished with her old life yet. The spring evening was perfect, the kind of night where the air felt like silk and possibilities seemed to shimmer in the breeze. Emma stood in the main ballroom of Harbor House's flagship location, overseeing final preparations for what Daniel had called his most important event of the year. Investors, industry leaders, and media representatives would be gathering to celebrate the launch of 3 new properties. Emma had poured her heart into creating an environment that reflected everything she had learned about making people feel valued. The lighting was warm rather than harsh. The seating arrangements encouraged conversation rather than hierarchy, and every detail whispered welcome rather than exclusivity. It's beautiful, Emma. Ah! Daniel appeared beside her, elegant in a dark suit that somehow made him look more approachable rather than more distant. You've outdone yourself. She smiled, feeling pride without embarrassment. It feels right. That's the best I can hope for. Daniel took her hand gently. I want you to know something. Tonight, when people ask who created this experience, I'm going to tell them your name. I'm going to make sure everyone knows that this beauty exists because of your vision. Emma squeezed his hand. Grateful for his understanding of what that meant to her, guests began arriving as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Emma moved through the crowd with grace, no longer disappearing into the background, but not demanding attention either. She had found something better than either extreme. She had found the ability to simply be present, taking up exactly the amount of space she needed. No more and no less. She was adjusting a flower arrangement when she felt a familiar presence. The air seemed to shift, carrying a cologne she once knew well. Emma turned slowly, already knowing who she would see. Richard stood near the entrance, looking older and somehow smaller than she remembered. His eyes scanned the room with the calculating gaze she knew so well, before landing on her. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, a recognition of something lost. Emma felt her heart rate increase, but not with fear. With a strange mixture of sadness for who she had been and pride for who she had become, Richard approached with the confidence of someone accustomed to being welcomed everywhere. Though Emma noticed it seemed slightly forced now, as if something fundamental had shifted in him. Emma, I heard you were working with Harbor House. But I didn't realize you were the lead planner, Richard. She kept her voice neutral, professional. What brings you here tonight? Ashford Industries is considering a partnership with Cross Hotels. I'm here to evaluate the investment. His eyes traveled over her, taking in the emerald dress she wore, the same one he had once forbidden. You look different. I am different. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Emma noticed Daniel across the room, watching the interaction with concern, but not interfering, trusting her to handle the situation herself. Emma, could we talk? Privately? Richard's voice carried a note she had never heard before. It took her a moment to identify it, uncertainty, against her better judgment. She gestured toward a quiet corner away from the main gathering. Richard followed, and for the first time in their entire relationship, he seemed to be following her lead. I made mistakes, Richard began, the words clearly difficult for him. I've had time to reflect since you left. I took you for granted. I treated you as an accessory rather than a partner. I see that now. Emma regarded him calmly, waiting for him to continue. When I saw photos of you with Daniel Cross, looking happy and confident, I realized what I'd lost. Emma, I want you to come back. I've changed. I understand now what I did wrong. Emma took a slow breath, organizing thoughts she had been forming for months. Richard, you're not here because you've changed. You're here because I have. When I was small and quiet and invisible, I was convenient for you. Now that I'm living fully, being myself without apology, I've become interesting to you again. But that's not love. That's just wanting what you can no longer control. Richard's face tightened. That's not fair. I'm trying to apologize to make things right. No, you're trying to undo your loss. There's a difference. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. I spent years trying to become what you wanted, shrinking myself to fit into your idea of perfect. I'm not angry about that anymore, Richard. But I'm also not going back to it. Emma, please. I hope you find happiness, Emma said sincerely. I hope you learn to value your next partner for who they are, not for how well they complement your image. But that partner won't be me. I've found something better than being wanted. I've found being valued. She turned to walk away, but Richard caught her arm, not roughly, but desperately. Is it him? Daniel Cross? Are you with him? Emma gently removed his hand from her arm. This isn't about Daniel. This is about me choosing myself. Maybe for the first time ever, she walked away, feeling lighter with each step. Daniel met her halfway across the room, his expression questioning but supportive. Are you okay? He asked quietly. I'm perfect, Emma said, and meant it. The rest of the evening unfolded beautifully. Emma circulated through the crowd, engaging in genuine conversations, accepting compliments gracefully, contributing ideas when asked. She belonged in this space she had created, not as background decoration, but as an essential presence. Near the end of the evening, Daniel invited her to join him on the terrace. The city sprawled below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. You handled that with remarkable grace, Daniel said. Your ex-husband. I've had practice being graceful in difficult situations, but tonight felt different. Tonight, I was graceful for myself, not for him. Daniel smiled, then grew more serious. Emma, I want to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. Not just the words, but the meaning behind them. She turned to face him fully, her heart quickening. Since you came into my life, everything has felt more alive. More real? You've taught me that creating beautiful spaces is about more than aesthetics. It's about making room for people to be fully themselves. He took her hands gently. You do that naturally, Emma. You create space for authenticity just by being authentic yourself. Daniel, and let me finish, he said softly. I'm not going to ask you to marry me tonight. We both know you need time to fully reclaim yourself, to continue becoming who you're meant to be. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I would be honored to build a life with you. Not a life where you fit into my world, but a life where we create a world together. Emma felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of recognition, of finally being seen completely. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. For the first time in years, I'm not afraid of being too much or not enough. With you, I'm just right. Exactly as I am. Daniel pulled her close, and they stood together under the stars. To people who had found each other not through desperation or need, but through mutual recognition and respect, in the months that followed, Emma's business flourished. She became known throughout the city as someone who could transform any space into a place where people felt valued and celebrated. She and Daniel continued building their relationship slowly, intentionally, without rushing toward some predetermined destination. A year after the gala that changed everything, Emma stood in front of another mirror, but this time the woman looking back was radiant with self-possession. She wore a dress of her own choosing, in a color that made her happy. Her hair fell naturally around her shoulders. Her smile required no one's permission. Daniel appeared behind her reflection, wrapping his arms around her waist. Ready for today? Today was the opening of their collaborative project, a community event space they had designed together, where local organizations could hold gatherings without the burden of expensive venue costs. It was a space built on Emma's philosophy that everyone deserved to celebrate their moments in beautiful surroundings, and Daniel's belief that business could be both profitable and purposeful. I'm ready, Emma said, leaning back against him. I'm so very ready. The opening was attended by hundreds of people from across the community. Grace stood in the front row, beaming with pride. Thomas from Chen Events brought his entire team. Even some of Emma's old friends from before her marriage appeared, reconnecting with the woman they had known before she disappeared. When it was Emma's turn to speak, she stood at the podium without notes, speaking from the heart. This space exists because I learned something important. I learned that we all deserve to be seen. Not edited, not adjusted, not modified to fit someone else's expectations. Just seen as we are, in our full complexity and beauty. She paused, her eyes finding Daniel in the crowd. This space is my promise to everyone who enters. Here you belong. Here you are enough. Here you are welcome, exactly as you are. The applause was thunderous, but Emma barely heard it. She was looking at the faces in the crowd, seeing reflected back to her the same recognition she felt. They understood because they had felt it too, the pressure to be less, to shrink, to apologize for existing. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and explored the new space, Emma found a quiet moment to stand alone, taking it all in. The high ceilings that allowed for expansiveness, comfortable seating that invited people to stay and connect, the warm lighting that made everyone look beautiful. She had created this, not despite what she had survived with Richard, but because of it. She had taken the pain of being made invisible and transformed it into a commitment to ensuring others felt seen. "Penny, for your thoughts." Daniel appeared beside her, offering her a glass of champagne. Emma accepted it, clinking her glass against his. "I was thinking about how strange life is. A year and a half ago, I couldn't imagine being happy again. I thought I had lost myself completely. But I hadn't lost myself. I had just forgotten where to look, and where was that? Right here." She touched her chest, over her heart. "I was always here, waiting for me to come back home." Daniel kissed her temple softly. "I'm glad you found your way back." As the sun set through the large windows, painting everything in shades of gold, Emma felt a completeness she had never experienced before. Not the completeness of being with someone, but the completeness of being whole within herself first, and then sharing that wholeness with someone who honored it. Her phone buzzed with a message. From Grace. "I always knew you'd find your light again, my darling girl. Shine bright." Emma smiled and looked around the room one more time. At the people connecting, laughing, celebrating in a space she had created. At Daniel, who had loved her not by trying to save her, but by creating space for her to save herself. At the life she had built from the ruins of what she thought would destroy her. She had been told she didn't fit in the picture, that she wasn't right for the image someone else wanted to project. And in being pushed out of that frame, she had discovered something infinitely more valuable. She didn't need to fit into anyone's picture. She could create her own canvas, paint her own story, invite others to witness the masterpiece of an authentic life. Emma Sterling had disappeared once, erased by someone who couldn't see her value. But she had reappeared, not as someone's accessory or someone's wife, but as herself. Fully, unapologetically, beautifully herself. And that, she finally understood, was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.